If you've ever been told to be less emotional at work, this conversation might completely change how you think about leadership. We're chatting with Roberta Moore, founder of EQI Coach and an executive coach specializing in emotional intelligence and leadership transformation.
This is Charleston Women Podcast, where you can meet like-minded, strong, independent, professional, and inspiring local women. This is Charleston Women Podcast.
Hello, this is Kim Russo, your host of the Charleston Women Podcast. Today we're joined by Roberta Moore, founder of EQI Coach and an executive coach who helps high-performance leaders strengthen their emotional intelligence. With a background spanning in corporate finance and psychology, Roberta works with leaders who are often highly analytical, but want to lead with more clarity, connection, and impact. Her approach centers on the idea of becoming strong through gentleness and shows how mastering your inner world can transform not just your leadership, but your relationships and overall quality of life. Thanks for being here, Roberta.
Thank you, Kim, for the invitation. I was very excited to accept.
I know, and I love that we know each other outside of this world too through the Dames, so I'm really excited to have you here too as well. Let's start with you. So your background is such a unique blend of the corporate finance and the psychology. So how did it lead you to your path of executive coaching?
I love answering this question. I actually talk about it when I put on a workshop. It's because I started in accounting, actually, because my father was an accountant. So I guess I was a daddy's girl and wanted to be one too. And along the way, I realized that I was so interested in people, so interested in their stories. My specialty was tax. When people would come in as a new client, and let's say I'd be taking information for their tax return, they might tell me personal stories like, oh, I think I'm getting a divorce. How will that affect my taxes next year? And what do I need to do? And I would be more interested in hearing about that than I would be taking the numbers in the tax return, and realize, okay, I think I'd rather go study psychology and understand human behaviors. And that's how I switched.
Wow, that's super fascinating. I mean, it's actually really kind of cool that you kind of discovered that within the process, that was something that you loved more. Besides that, what initially drew you to the emotional intelligence specifically?
I'll tell on myself personally. It's because when I was younger, I was not in control of my emotions. Even on certain days, right, we could all get triggered because we have a part of our brain called the amygdala. But realizing that if I would get a better handle on self-governance, being able to use my emotions wisely instead of them just cropping up and me getting triggered, I would be more effective. So I went to a therapist, and I just picked somebody who was the therapist of my girlfriend without really researching, and just happened to choose somebody who was very learned in emotional intelligence. So she spent a lot of time teaching that to me. And I saw what a change it made in my own life as I learned to choose emotions instead of them choosing me so much. My relationships got better. My career got better. So I knew the power of it, Kim. I lived it myself.
How does that relate to somebody in a leadership role? How does that affect them?
A question I always ask in my seminars is, think of a boss. Okay. Think of somebody you really liked or somebody you did not like as a boss. They were a good boss or a bad boss. And what do the bad bosses have in common? Most people say the same thing. That person didn't listen to me, or they put me down. I didn't feel safe with them. I didn't feel like I could tell them the truth when I made a mistake. You will see that when people have low EQ, they're not as able to relate to their team, whether they're the leader or they're a coworker.
I've had bosses in the past that have yelled and they get really angry over nothing.
I was once hired to work with somebody like that. And that person, when they would get angry, it was an office that was open so that there weren't separate offices. Everybody could hear everything. That person would throw files at the wall and use the F word and distract the entire office. And I was brought in to help that person calm down and self-regulate.
I'm a calm person, and I want to take this back to me as a leader, because I know me, I'm kind of like a an even keel emotional person, but leadership was really hard with my team to figure out, like, am I their best friend? Am I their boss? It was really hard to figure out what that balance was. Do I overshare because I'm a very upfront person? So is that some signs too that, there's some growing that needs to happen?
Well, there's boundaries, right? Learning what's the right boundary. It reminds me, Kim, of somebody I'm working with right now who has what we call founder's dilemma. They are a founder, and yet they brought in an investor. So they are not the boss so much anymore. And they had a leadership style like that, where they were very friendly with the sales team. And now the investor wants to change the culture, as they often do, and doesn't want any of that, hey, we're having a beer after work, right? Or we're going to a barbecue together. And so it's a big change for that person. So the answer to your question is yes.
Yeah.
That has to be learned.
What are some signs that someone might be strong intellectually, but they're lacking in this area?
You can tell a strong technical person, right? So a lot of my clients are in cybersecurity or technology. So the metrics, when they get their work done, that's how we know that they're good intellectually, right? They know how to do their job. We know when they need to improve their EQ because they don't communicate well, or they're not able to form collaborative working relationships, or they're upsetting other people on the team. Maybe they yell, like you said before, or maybe they do the opposite and shut down and they get passive aggressive. I've seen that happen too. Lack of trust is a big one, when people lose trust.
Now, is there a pattern that you notice that people with strong or high IQs do lack some emotional? Is there like a correlation that you've discovered?
I can see it oftentimes before I give someone the assessment, just by talking to them. However, using the scientifically reliable and valid EQI 2.0 assessment, the person self-rates, answers 133 different questions online, and then I score it, and I know exactly, according to 16 different EQ skills, Kim, whether they're in balance. That's the most important thing, to be in balance in the skills. Which skills are highly developed, which skills are not so developed, and how do we bring those into balance? So it's obvious then when I'm able to look at that assessment tool.
Once you've kind of discovered that, what's kind of the process to get them? Is it something that they can learn and change and grow from?
I love that, because I know you know at least about the DISC, other personality indicators. Research tells us that our personalities can change a little bit, but not drastically over time. But you can change the skills. Skills can change. And that's why I love this emotional intelligence tool, because the research tells us skills can be learned. I talk about ACE a lot. A stands for assertiveness, C for confidence, E for empathy. When those are balanced and they're highly developed, a person is going to be much more productive, effective. One of the studies done showed that CEOs who were balanced and high in those skills add 127% more to the bottom line.
What are a few core skills that they do learn to get there?
The assessment results becomes the roadmap. Then we know exactly where to dial in. So if somebody is like, I'll just use me. When I was younger, before I started all this training, I was way too high in empathy. And I was lower in my assertiveness and out of balance. So how that would look, just to give you an illustration, I was always afraid of hurting people's feelings. So I would go way out of my way, like I would give too much. I was out of balance. And so the coach that I was working with, Dr. Dana Ackley, taught me that I had to dial that down. Empathy is about being curious about other people. It's a skill that helps me do my job. When I'm working with somebody, as long as they're open and honest with me, Kim, I can really read what's kind of like under the hood and see what's causing the behaviors that they want to change. When I wasn't as assertive, I didn't take as much initiative. And so you have to dial down the empathy, not be quite as curious, and I had to dial up my ability to open my mouth and speak my opinion. But guess what? That also comes from having confidence, which I was low in at the time. So that confidence is like or self-regard is the foundational skill. You have to have enough of that to build any of the other skills in this model.
In 1996, it was Southern Women to Women magazine. Now it's Charleston Women magazine. Charleston Women is all about strong, capable, confident, hardworking, nurturing, determined, dedicated, and inspiring women. Our readers are business owners, entrepreneurs, mothers, sisters, wives, and grandmothers. Pick up your copy of Charleston Women magazine at Charleston area Harris Teeters and Food Lions. Charleston Women magazine. We are Charleston Women.
You're listening to the Charleston Women Podcast.
How does somebody seek you out? Because I'd imagine most leaders don't want to admit this about themselves, and that's just an assumption.
You're correct. That's quite correct.
So how do they get to you, and how long does it take them to get to open up and really lean into this process with you?
That is something I learned along the way, Kim, because that's quite accurate. In the early days, it would be HR that would contact me, and it would usually be because somebody was on a performance improvement plan, which is called a PIP, and they might have 90 days to change how they were behaving, not performing, because these are usually highly functional, quite smart performers. I took those early on, and then I learned that's not optimal because it could take 6 months for me to build trust with that person for all the reasons you just said. They felt their head was on the chopping block. We only had 90 days and you can't rush this kind of work. Now, who I prefer to work with is people who are already high performers that already are humble in a way, and they know. They're able to have enough confidence to say, I have a blind spot. I'm not sure where it is. Somebody yesterday who came to me said, I want to understand how to better communicate so that my team will listen to me. I want to be able to give them a directive, step away, and let them feel enough independence where I'm not micromanaging them, that they know what to do. So, Roberta, how do I do that? So leaders like that already are aware they could be doing a better job.
Is it a frustration that they come to you with?
Yeah, usually it's a frustration. But sometimes, Kim, it's just a change. They're new to the leadership role. They just got promoted. Or maybe, here's another way, they want to get promoted, and their boss has told them, if you want to get promoted, you need to be better at building trust, or you need to be better at talking to people or influencing people.
Do you mostly work with corporate, or do you work with a lot of small businesses too as well? We're Charleston, a lot of female entrepreneurs, a lot of high achieving women. So how does that look like with how you work with and separate between corporate and small business?
I actually work with both. The bigger corporations tend to be East Coast and West Coast because I work virtually. Although, as you know, I've just rented new office space so that I could see people in person if I wish to. But I also work with small businesses. So really, the criteria is somebody open, honest, and willing to change. And do they want to change? Because, Kim, this is hard work. I know because I've had to do it myself. To change behaviors, we do cognitive behavioral type exercises. We're role playing. I'm asking people to try having a conversation with somebody with whom they have a conflict maybe, and we're trying out new skills so they can be scared or anxious.
Yeah, that's tough to do. And takes time, I know, to build up to that level to be confident enough to do so.
Yes. And we take it one step at a time.
I love the phrase strong through gentleness. So I feel like that kind of coincides with what we're just talking about. So what does that really mean? Being confident too, to be strong enough, and what's the gentleness too, to navigate those tough situations?
It means that you don't have to be harsh and aggressive and in somebody's face to get results and to be a good leader. If you think of the concept that I was talking about before about balancing assertiveness with empathy, if you're too high in empathy and low in assertiveness, you might be looking passive, like you just fail to take action. So you're not going to make as good decisions, and you might procrastinate, you might be a perfectionist, you might not get things done on time. And the opposite is, a lot of clients I've worked with are too aggressive, and they don't have enough empathy skills. So they are unapproachable. They put people off. People don't like working for them. They don't do their best job because they start to care less, right? They don't like the boss. You have to balance those two. And I say, let's be warm and firm. Those boundaries that you were talking about before, Kim, it's true. You have to have firm boundaries. One of the clients I was talking to last week, I told that person, when I was taught to do child-centered work, like understanding psychosocial development with young kids, here's what they need to feel safe, seen, and heard. Rules, limits, boundaries, consistency, structure, and routine. And I told this client that's the same thing you need in business. And he identified he was lacking structure and he was lacking consistency. But he still wanted to have a fun culture, he said. We are now working on how does he get structure, like then knowing how much to tell about himself, whether to be the friend or not the friend, but also be warm, but holding firm when he has to be. So strong through gentleness means just that, warm and firm.
So how does this transfer into your personal life? You talked about this as really being for within the business realm, but what about how does it affect them in their personal life? And do you often enter that territory just naturally?
Sometimes. Thank you for asking. So I wrote a book. It's called Emotion at Work, Unleashing the Secret Power of Emotional Intelligence. And your question is reminding me of a true story. They're all true stories in the book, like a before, during, and after our work together. One of the people in the book that I called Victor, not the real person's name, but that's what I called that person. In the very beginning of our work, that was a person who didn't have enough empathy and was more demanding in an aggressive way with the team. And the team was not hitting the numbers. This person was a top sales person in their industry, and then they instead became a manager. And they just expected everybody on the team to do it the way they did it to become top salesperson. And everybody's motivated differently. So this person was having trouble motivating the team. So we had to work a lot on dialing down that aggression so that it was more like assertiveness, the sweet spot in the middle, and dialing up the empathy. And I found out over time that that person was having trouble at home with their spouse. They were being too demanding, too authoritative. They were too firm. They weren't warm enough. That person ended up telling me that after we got that warmth, built up that human caring, that things got a lot better at home too in that marital relationship.
It's hard to, I know as a business owner, compartmentalize like personal and business. It all overlaps. I mean, I know Jeremy, my partner, he's my venting machine. Like if I'm stressed out at work, it's coming home with me for sure. I'm sure there's a balance you have to work with there.
You reminded me of something I had planned to say or wanted to say about EQ. A thing I believe strongly is we can't compartmentalize ourselves for the reasons you just said. We think we can. And sure, you have to maybe sometimes have a different persona on, right, with certain clients or in your work than you do at home with a partner or a spouse or a friend. When I was younger, my relationships tended to be unhealthy because I was overgiving. And then I saw that therapist and she helped me with this. When my relationships outside of work became healthier, my work became healthier. I became more productive. Why? Because I could focus and I could concentrate on work without in my head worrying about what was going on in my social life. And I have clients today that will tell me, oh, Roberta, I can't focus this week because I had a spat. We had a big fight and I'm preoccupied and that's all I can think of. What do? I'm not performing. I'm not getting my work done. So that's why we're like, we're holistic people.
Another thing that I feel lucky to have met you as soon as you moved to Charleston, but you recently relocated here. I think it was about almost 2 years ago now.
Still only a year and a few months.
I feel like I've known you so much longer. Maybe that's how warm you are.
It's because I met you before I moved here, actually, Kim.
Oh, okay.
I was coming to visit before we actually made the move.
Yeah. So what made you make the move? I know you had your own practice built up and you had the shift. How did that look like for you?
We had also lived in Columbia, South Carolina for a bit, my husband and I, and we had lived near Asheville. So we knew the Charleston area, and it's where we used to always come to vacation a couple times a year. And we loved it. And it was like a dream out there in the future. Oh, someday we would come here. And then I realized at some point, someday may never come. I mean, COVID had a lot to do with that, right? I think a lot of people went through that, like, oh, wait a minute, we are not guaranteed tomorrow. I said to my husband, of course he was on board, this was in October of 24, I guess. I think we need to get here before the snow comes to St. Louis. They had a very hard winter. They had a lot of snow, and I was just over it. So that influenced hurry up and come here. And I was lucky enough that all but maybe 2 clients came with me virtually.
Okay. And I know you talked about wanting a space for a while. So is it because people prefer to do a mixture of in-person and virtual? What made you make that decision to grab a space?
First, I used to see people both virtually and in person, just depending on what they wanted to do when I was in St. Louis. I miss that. My eyes get tired being on a screen all day. And what I realized, I think I came to this realization 3rd or 4th quarter last year, that all I had done was taken everything I had and plopped it into my home office. Mm-hmm. And if I didn't get out more, I was never going to make friends and become rooted in this community of Charleston. So I knew I had to take initiative. I had to push myself a little bit. And I thought the only way to do that is probably to get out. And then, because we were at a Dame's photo shoot, one of the people there had suggested that if it were she'd be more inclined to come see me in person. Mm-hmm. And she had asked, do you have an office? And that got me thinking, maybe it's time.
Yeah.
Because I'm an extrovert, and so I like being out and about. And Serendipity Labs gives me privacy, but also the other people in that space to meet.
Yeah, and Serendipity Labs, that's great. We host a lot of our Dames events there, and you'll be speaking there May 6th.
May 6th. Yes, I'll end my workday and go my office is right next to that big room.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. So if you're listening to this, come 5 to 7, May 6th at Serendipity Labs. And you've also done a really good job putting yourself out there in the community. So you've been to a few Charleston women's events. You've been to the Dames. You've brought a group here to Charleston. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I was asked over a year ago by Michelle Stockman, who started WEW, Women Empowering Women. She started that in St. Louis, and she owns, I think, 4 or 5 businesses herself. And she wanted a space that would be, her tagline is collaboration over competition. And she had asked me if I would help start a Charleston chapter, and I just had my hands too full. And then luckily, Diane Story, who is a healthcare consultant at BDO, she came along and happened to ask Michelle, I don't know how she found Michelle, but hey, is there a chapter here in Charleston? And Michelle said, no, but I can introduce you to somebody who was going to start one, and you two can co-lead it and maybe work together to get it launched. So that's exactly what happened. And we just had our soft launch in April at Serendipity Labs, and we'll have our next meeting May 4th.
Where can people find you? Because I think people don't maybe realize they need your help, but 100% do. So how can they work with you and find you?
The easiest way, Kim, is they can phone me at 828-329-0431. There's also my website, eqicoach.com, and I am on LinkedIn. You can just look up Roberta Moore on LinkedIn. And they can also find me at the WEW meetings or the Dames meetings. I'm also in ACG Charleston, which is the Association for Corporate Growth. We're a smaller chapter here because we've only been around, I think it's 2 years now. I was a member in St. Louis, and that's a group that pulls in people that are more in the deal-making space. But they can find me there too.
Roberta, thank you so much for being a guest on the Charleston Women podcast and allowing us to learn so much about your executive coaching and EQI coach.
Thank you, Kim. You've been a delightful hostess.
Thank you. I'm Kim Russo, your host of the Charleston Women podcast, and I'll see you on next time.
Thanks for spending time with Charleston Women Podcast. Please like us and follow us on whatever platform you're using to access Charleston Women Podcast.